Hi there, and welcome to Eat Clean Lesson 12. Today we are going over the fourth item in the big nutrition goals you're trying to achieve on our Eat Clean do's, don'ts, and sometimes. So far we've gone over in recent videos how to decrease processed foods, how to increase your veggies, and how to increase your water. So this week we're going to talk about one of the other suggestions that you want to do. Don't mind, we've got Jake in the background having some fun with Daddy. How to include lean protein in every single meal. So just take a look for a second at all the items that I have here in front of me, and what this demonstrates is the wide variety of potential protein sources that you can include in your meals. So where you choose to have your protein sources come from depends on a lot of factors. It depends on income, it depends on your ability to tolerate certain foods. So can you tolerate meat, can you tolerate dairy, can you tolerate nuts? And then of course the other thing that you need to consider too is what's your opinion on eating meat and animal products, both from an animal cruelty position and just in general how much resources it takes to create those types of things. So lots of things to consider in nutrition, but what I want to demonstrate is the different options that you do have. Oh, as well, if your doctor has requested that you limit certain things because you've got some sort of an illness, that's obviously another consideration. But what this should show you is that there's a huge variety of where you can get your protein sources. So today I'm going to show you both where your protein can come from at each meal, and then what the approximate serving size should be. So over in this category, starting over here, we've got fish. So if you were to have something like the salmon, in general, when you're looking at any type of meat, whether it be fish or more animal product related, you're looking at about a palm size. So if you visualize taking the salmon, it would be about that much would be a serving size of your salmon. Each one of these demonstrates approximately a serving size. Now it's a little bit give or take, and it's a bit of an eyeball. Some people do really well with measuring specific ounces and grams. Typically what I'm preaching to is people who just want a ballpark estimate, and I find especially for those who are starting out that works the best because measuring things is a little bit overwhelming. So again, if I take that on my palm, it's a little bit thick, so that's a larger serving size, but still about a serving size. That would be about a serving size, and then I've cut up some lean beef here, and that's about a serving size. So everything that I've shown here are lean options, probably the things that I would recommend. Something like a lean turkey pepperoni is not your ideal choice. Is it better than regular pepperoni? Yes. Is it as good as these items here? No, because it's processed. And as well, if I was to have an entire serving size, the protein content would be a little bit lower. Serving size in terms of what it looks like on my hand, and the sodium content would be high. So for things that are ideal, what I would suggest, only using them as a little bit of extra flavor. Don't use them as your main protein source, and think of it as a bit of a treat. So moving over here as well, we've got eggs. So a serving size of eggs would be 2 to 3 eggs. Again, exact serving sizes you're going to have to play around with this. It's going to depend a lot on your body size, the amount of lean body mass that you have, and your activity level. So what I'm giving you here is a ballpark starting point, and you can experiment with what things work well for you in terms of how your energy feels, how your weight is being maintained, and what your goals are. So an approximate serving size of egg whites would be somewhere between 1/2 to a cup cooked. If you can tolerate dairy, some really good sources of protein would be Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. Serving sizes of those would be somewhere between 3/4 to a full cup. Now notice what I recommend here. I've got a plain version here of yogurt versus a sweetened version. I would sweeten this myself either with some stevia, maybe some vanilla, and maybe some spices, or adding some fruit. So I would tend to recommend to stay away from the flavored fruit because they're relatively high in sugar. As another potential source of protein, you could either go with a glass of milk. So a serving size would be approximately 1 cup, or 1 cup of soy milk. Do watch with the soy milks. Take a look at the sugar content. A lot of them are high in sugar if they're sweetened, so aim for a minimally sweetened beverage if you are going to go for that. We'll talk about cheese in a second because that's kind of in a special category. These are things that have minimal fat, and again, the serving size is somewhere between, for these guys, 3/4 to 1/4 of a cup. Each of these would be about a cup serving. And moving over here to more vegetarian or vegan options. So we've got your beans and lentils. Beans and lentils, again, if you're going to have a serving size for your protein source, if you're counting that as your protein source, somewhere between 3/4 of a cup to a cup to count as your protein source. And then finally, moving over here, another option to consider for your protein source would be nuts. Now, nuts are higher in fat, so you do really have to be aware of your portion sizes. So using a palm or a fist is probably not your ideal. So here we've got, if you're using a serving size for a snack, there's about 15 to 20 nuts up to 1/4. So for weight loss, again, 15 to 20 nuts in a snack. If you're going more for energy, you could go as much as 1/4 of a cup. If you're using nuts as your main protein source within a meal, somewhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of a cup would be okay. But again, you're going to get higher fat. And again, if you're a mainly vegan or vegetarian, that amount of fat is probably not going to be a big deal because you're not having animal products. You're probably not having a lot of other fat in your meal. Case in point, I had a dinner party last night. And I'm experimenting with just trying to make sure that I'm including a variety of protein sources in my diet, in our family's diet, instead of just having meat, more from a sociological perspective in terms of an ethical option for us. So we made these are nut patties. So there is, that's about 1/2 of a serving size of what a nut patty would look like. So that is made of cashews, almonds, some flaxseed, and a little bit of coconut oil and some balsamic vinegar. So again, there's a unique protein source that you may not have thought of. Other options that you have for protein source would be your basic cheese. So what I've shown here, these 3 slices are about what you would have for a full serving size for a meal. So if that's your main protein source in the meal, that's about what you would get. And if you were going to have your cheese as a snack, I would cut that in 1/2. So that's maybe what my snack size for cheese would be. So the other final item that you would want to consider as a protein source would be some sort of protein supplement. So what we have here is a whey supplement. There are also vegetarian options of protein powders coming from rice protein, pea protein, soy, or a combination of those. So lots of different options, and usually what they have is they have a scoop in here. One note, if you've ever wondered, people throw around the term protein isolate. If you're looking at just a plain protein source, protein isolate means that this is just pure protein. There are protein drinks out there which have carbohydrates in the form of sugar added to them. So most of the time, majority of the time, I always recommend looking for a protein isolate. So that means having 2 to 3 or maximum 6 grams of carbohydrates, and you add your carbohydrate source. Now, nutrition becomes very complex, so the one thing I do want to address here, or just make sure that I also talk about, is for your milk products and your beans and lentils. Those are pretty much almost a 50-50 combination of protein and carbohydrate. In fact, each one of these items has slightly more carbohydrate than protein in this single serving size. So what I mean by that, in a single serving size, the 3/4 of a cup of any of your lentils, you're going to get about 12 grams of carbohydrate and 8 grams of protein. Why am I bringing that up? The only reason I'm bringing that up is if, say, you do have meat in your diet, or you're using one of these other protein sources, cheese or nuts, and you want to add some carbohydrate, a healthy carbohydrate, what I've shown before is lentils or beans being a viable option. And that's fine to do. So however you want to count that, if you're building your meals and you're thinking, well, Heather's told me that I should have protein and carbohydrate together, you can count the beans and lentils or the milk product, whatever works for you. You can count them as either a protein or a carbohydrate. Hope that makes sense. Please feel free to shoot me an email if that wasn't clear. Again, we just want to try to make sure that there are lots of different options for different lifestyles as to what counts as a protein serving. The other thing that is probably important to address is that if you were to have a serving of protein, as I'm counseling, at every single meal and every single snack, your protein intake would probably be a little bit higher than the RDI, recommended dietary intake, which basically means what is the minimal amount you need to be relatively healthy. So again, it depends on your school of thought. What we found with active individuals, or what a lot of people have found with active individuals, is that they can and do better off with a slightly higher protein intake than the bare minimum recommended. Do you need it? No. If you feel you do better with lesser protein, that's fine, and experiment with minimizing the protein serving size. The other thing that's important to note is you don't have to have your protein source from a single item. So what I mean by that, let me just run to the fridge here and pull out what one of our meals for the week is. So, as you know, I prepare our meals every week ahead of time. So let me show you what I've got in here. So we've got some of the beef and chicken cut up in here, so that's about the palm size, stuck in this little corner here of my protein. I've got my kabocha squash and my sweet potato for my carbohydrate. And deep down in here, if you were to dig around, there's a little bit of lentils too, because I had that left over for something else. So what I've actually done is the actual animal meat serving size is slightly smaller, and I've amped it up with a little bit of lentils. So that's what was going on in my head for creating our meals. Why did I do that? A, to get rid of some leftovers, and B, saves a little bit of money, from having such a large serving size of meat at every meal. And again, in my own personal opinion, ethically, I want to try to minimize some of the animal products that I'm having. Selfishly, I think having animal products for me personally and my family seems to work really well with our individual metabolisms. But again, there's that ethical dilemma that I face with the animal issue. So nutrition is a very complex thing. Hopefully by bringing that thought forward, I haven't confused you more. But again, nutrition is not just about the nuts and bolts and physiology. It's a social thing, and it's a sociological thing. So I want to try to bring that all into the discussion. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope that wasn't overly confusing, and look forward to chatting with you next time.